Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns Those Anti-Federalists. They did. They absolutely got it right, and more of this week continues to prove that over and over and over again. And yes, this is Tom Navolis, your host, and I'm delighted to be here with you again today. And once again, I have to say, as I did last week, I told you so. I know, you may get tired of hearing me say that, but it wasn't me that started it that way. Let me start this week off with saying you have to go and look at the promo at samueladamsreturns.net for today's program, because I'll tell you what, I lay it out there very, very well for you. A lot of stuff, more different than what I'm talking about today. Let's just look at the title of the program, for instance. It's Deserving of What It Is, Perish with Your Oppressors. And quite frankly, I wasn't the first one to say, I told you so. In fact, as you see there, it was Sam Adams that laid it out. He laid it out, and I can't even begin to express to you the need, the necessity for your moral action, because it's been a failure, especially for those evangelicals that are out there. They, and pastors in particular, church leaders in particular, have failed the American people and our Constitution, to which something we're going to talk about, where you have a Harvard and a Yale law professor who are saying, we don't need the Constitution anymore. We need to get rid of it. We don't have to follow it. So that's what the politicians are doing. They're listening to these brainiacs. But we have to begin with Sam Adams, what he wrote into the Boston Gazette in October 14, 1771. Isn't that interesting? 1771. And he goes, I believe that no people ever yet groaned under the heavy yoke of slavery, but when they deserved it. This may be called a severe censure upon by far greatest part of the nation in the world who are involved in the misery of servitude. But however they may be thought by some to deserve commiseration, the censure is just. Now here is why I know Sam Adams is a reformer, Puritan Christian. Because here's the reference he makes. In Zuinglius, who was a who? He was a Swiss reformer. Zuinglius, one of the first reformers, in his friendly admonition to the Republic of the Switzers, discourse much of his countrymen's throwing off the yoke. He says that they who lie under oppression deserve what they suffer, and a greater more. And he bids them perish with their oppressors. So that wasn't Tom that gave that title. That wasn't even Sam Adams. That goes all the way back to the Reformation with a church political leader. Wow. You know, I've talked about this program and I've talked about Candidus in the past, but it's so appropriate to everything that's going on from this Biden administration and all that is coming out of this, I don't know, globalist, socialist, behemoth, tyrannical Congress, and all of these companies. Wow. Here it sits, is what he says to his countrymen, Zuinglius. He goes here and says that if you lie under oppression, you deserve it. You deserve what you suffer. and a greater more. And he bids them perish with their oppressors. There you go. Joe Munchin, Macon, or however you pronounce his name. Now you got everybody stabbing you in the back from the liberal left because you caved to their insanity over a little pipeline. Now you're whining like a crybaby, and you're not going to get what you want. And what are you going to do about it? You're the one that allowed the evil of environmentalism to come into America in a fully funded religion, national religion. Anyway, we go on here from what Sam Adams is saying. It is possible that millions could be enslaved by a few, which is a notorious fact. If all possess the independent spirit of Brutus, who to his immortal honor expelled the proud tyrant of Rome and his royal and rebellious race, if therefore a people will not be free, if they have not virtue enough to maintain their liberty against a presumptuous invader, that's an internal invader, they deserve no pity and are to be treated with contempt and ignominy. So I'm wondering, I know a lot of you that are listening to this program, except those that are listening in at the Christian networks that I'm a part of, this is the first time you've probably ever heard of this. I know, because nobody talks to you about the historical truth, especially you folks out there in St. Louis. I don't know who listens to this program. They don't keep any statistics, so I think nobody does, because nobody has sent me an email or nobody's even contributed anything to this type of ministry. But, you know, it just goes on to say that, guess what? You deserve what you're getting, especially if you're a pastor that's listening and you're out there teaching an eschatology that wants everybody to run to the roofs and wait for Jesus' return. He is going to return. That's a fact. That is a fact, but not in the way that a lot of pulpits have taught it. No, I go with here, Sam Adams and the early reformers, and their view of it is that, hey, how come you're not standing up against evil, standing up against tyranny? Nope, you've allowed the presumptuous invader, therefore you deserve it. And there is no pity for you, and you are to be treated with contempt and ignominy. So there you go. Now, Sam Adams hit it pretty hard. He goes and talks about, you know, Caesar in Rome. He talks about how this tyrant, a smooth and subtle tyrant who led them gently into slavery. Well, we had Obama that was leading us gently into slavery, and then you had the overt slavery now under Biden. And as we know, he's not around, so Susan Rice is running the country, and she's running the country with Obama right behind her and giving her what needs to be completed. Then you have Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and all of those that are that trifecta of not even a subtle tyrant anymore. And there's the whole administrative state on top of that, who led them gently into slavery, and on his brow, or daring vice-diluting a virtue, smiled by pretending to be the people's great friend. He gained the ascendancy over them by beguiling arts, hypocrisy, and flattery. which are even more fatal than the sword. He obtained that supreme power which his ambitious soul had long thirsted for. Wow. Oh, Biden, all the power mongers. Who is that? Klaus Schwab. Who is that? The leaders of BlackRock. All of them with all of these, what is that? Beguiling arts, hypocrisy. What? And flattery in some instances, more fatal than the sword. Well, the people were finally prevailed upon to consent to their own ruin by the force of persuasion, or rather by cajoling arts and tricks always made use of by men who have ambitious views. They enacted their lex regia, whereby quod plasutit principilia legis habitua vigorum, that is, the will and pleasure of the prince had the force of law. Wow. His minions had taken infinite pains to paint to their imaginations the godlike virtues of Caesar. Here we have it with all of the godlike features of the globalists, of the Klaus Schwabs, of the leaders of BlackRock, of the businesses, the corporatism, the technology. And we're going to talk about technology because, quite frankly, as I whisper into my microphone, the fact of the matter is that Klaus Schwab, who's there with the World Economic Forum, his leading thinker doesn't think you need to exist. You're worthless. And I'm going to talk about that in the second segment for sure. And now they make themselves the deities. They pursued them. And the people look at that with all of this transgenderism. Oh, yeah, and there is an article that I have in the references about the transgender is a scientist who has one of those Nobel Prizes. She's saying people are sick and crazy for thinking that there is anything other than male and female. Anyway, I digress. So they're persuaded that they believe he was a deity and all of these others are deities, then to sacrifice to him those rights and liberties which their ancestors had so long maintained, and unexampled bravery, and with blood and treasure. Wow, doesn't that sound something like the Declaration of Independence? Yeah, bravery, blood, treasure, virtue, liberties, and rights. This act fixed the precedented fatal to all prosperity. The Roman people afterwards, they were a mess, man. I'm just telling you straight up. We'll finish reading if you want to. Go to SamuelAdamsReturns.net. I have the link. It's been there before. There's a link to the other programs where I talk about this letter by Candidus, this article Sam Adams wrote in 1771. It's there. It's here again in PDF format for you to read. Oh my, here it is. Our enemies would fain have us lie down on a bed of sloth and security and persuade ourselves that there is no danger. I'm going to pick that up in this next segment as we talk about the technocratic evil that is coming upon us by Klaus Schwab's key person. Well, isn't that amazing? What are you going to do about it out there? Well, we'll talk about some of that in the third segment. We talked about it last week, but you got to understand that these people, the Klaus Schwabs, the BlackRocks, the corporatists, everyone that is in the Biden administration utilizing the media, they are daily administering the opiate with multiplied arts and delusions. Come on back in the next segment, because that's where we are going to pick it up when Samuel Adams returns. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this second segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, they got it right. Yep, this is Tom Novolis, and we're picking it right up with Candidus of 1771. And it's so spectacular to look at the media with everything that's going on and look at what they did with COVID and taking and shutting all the businesses down, taking and doing all of the unemployment insanities. And in 1771, you're being told, I told you so. And that being is that our enemies would fain have us lie down on the bed of sloth and security and persuade ourselves that there's no danger. They are daily, through the mainstream media and corporatism in particular, administering the opiate with multiplied arts and delusions. And what he goes on to say is this: I'm sorry to observe that the gilded pill is so alluring to some who call themselves the friends of liberty. Wow. Repudicans, I call you to stand up for liberty, but no. Oh, that gilded pill of power. Oh, you elected. Oh, you bureaucrats. You succumb so much to that gilded pill of power. It's alluring. And yet, you think you call yourself a friend of liberty. But there is no danger when the very foundations of our civil constitution tremble. Well, that's where we're going to get into in the third segment, more of these professors and an article that my friend here, let's see what Gary wrote. I got to get to the article. I've got several of them there that I took and set up for you. And Gary, in Faith and Freedom, is Gary Randall, and he wrote the article here called Broken Constitution Stands in the Way of Freedom. And here you are. Here's that gilded words that are coming to you. This broken and famously democratic U.S. Constitution stands in the way of real freedom and democracy, as it was said in a New York Times op-ed by two Ivy League law professors, one from Harvard, the other from Yale. The pair issued a call to radically alter the basic rules of the game by no longer requiring us to justify our politics by the Constitution. These two knuckleheads by the name of Dr. Ryan, and a doctor, that means a pilot high and deep. A PhD is a pilot high and deep. And so they're in it deep up to their necks with this nonsense. So you got this Doffler and then this other dude of Samuel Moyen. They teach at Harvard and Yale respectively. And they did this essay, The Constitution is Broken and Should Not Be Reclaimed. Where patriots are saying the Constitution's not broken, it's the system and the morality and the lack of virtue and the lack of teaching from the pulpits and on. But I got to say, here it is from Obama saying he wanted to remake America. Well, read Gary's article. I think it's really, really good. And I put a good plug in for my friend Gary in that respect. And hopefully someday we'll get him on the program. But when we're taking and we're looking at these words from Sam Adams, and we see this, and he's going, come on, but what's going on here? What is it? This whole thing on liberty, and we've got all these problems, and can we be cool spectators when we see it already removed from its place? With what resentment and indignation did we first receive the intelligence of a design to make us tributary, not to natural enemies, but infinitely more humiliating to fellow patriots? Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Let me segue on this point. The rest of it is here. It talks about, and yet with unparalleled insolence, we are told to be quiet. We are told to be quiet when we see that very money which is torn from us by lawless force made use of still further to oppress us. Holy smokes! Is this not predictive? No, actually. It is humanity without God, is what it is. And it goes all the way back to what I noted over and over and over in this program. There's nothing new under the sun. So with this and talking about these ideas of sloth and security and administering the opiate with multiplied arts and delusion and our Constitution being torn apart, one other thing here. Is it time for us to sleep when our free government is essentially changed and a new one is forming upon a quite different system? All right. At this point, I do have to jump over because you need to know, and there's articles out there. There's others who have put it out. There's a couple of my other friends that have this at their sites. But I was reading about this Yuval Noah Harari. The top of it says, and this is Lee Hohmann's site, leehohmann.com. He wrote the article here about this Harari spills the bean. We just don't need the vast majority of the population. That be you. That be you if you're a Christian. That be you if you're middle class. The vast majority. He declared in a recent interview that the vast majority of the world's 7.5 billion people are simply no longer needed due to technological advances in artificial intelligence and machine learning and bioengineering. Welcome to the Matrix. How are you feeling about that? Well, that could go to what were some of those other science fiction movies where, you go there. I've talked about this years ago already on this program where you go into the room and they spin you around and poof, you're gone. They disintegrate you and or they take you and they kill you and they turn your body into water, which we're seeing it. Bodies being used of the dead in Seattle and Washington State for compost and manure and all of that type of stuff. Yeah, that's out there. But here we have it is that, you're useless. You're useless. They take, and what they're saying, and Harari says this, we just don't need the vast majority of the population. He's going on with this and continuing with the whole idea that, technology is there to take your place. And you know what? If you think you're going to be in a job in technology, that's only for the chosen few. Because you have to be super smart. You have to take and fit into their scope of what that means. So what is the useless class? Harari repeats his previous predictions of a useless class of unemployable humans. Time out. Let's go back. 1771. I'm going to jump back real quick. So here we have this Harari dude flapping about what? Unemployable humans. Now, They want you to feign, lie down on a bed of sloth and security, and then they're going to administer this daily opiate with multiplied arts and delusions. And then you got all this political class that's sucking down, especially the repudicans are sucking down the gilded pill because it's so alluring, and they're calling it, oh, this is all the great stuff of liberty. Well, let's look at it a little bit more. And you have to see that this is all. He says that the useless people will need to be kept pacified by drugs and entertainment. Oh, my goodness. Sam Adams got it right. Drugs and entertainment for the useless, unemployable humans. What else? Otherwise, we've got a problem on our hands. How do we get rid of billions of useless eaters, or at least contain their anger and resentment at being cast to the social curb? He continues on in all these different stories, and he's going, you know what? Who cares about fascism, communism, liberalism? You know, these movements are just of the common man and their propaganda. And you know what? The whole idea is that the history, when kings and queens ruled by divine right and noblemen, had held their ownership of the land using the rest of the people as serfs. My goodness, what we have right now, Sam Adams was talking about again in Candidus in 1771. You know what? 21st century, this Harari is saying people are no longer part of the story of the future. They simply have no role. Here's Obama's New America. Humanity 1.0 is being phased out, and only those humans willing to make the transition to Humanity 2.0 and join the all-new species of transhumans, welcome to the Matrix, will be welcomed in the emerging technocratic society. Oh my, it is much worse psychologically to feel you are useless than to feel you are exploded, Harari says. That's true. You know what? The bottom line is they want you to be useless. They want you to be psychologically torn down because that's the way they get rid of you. How many kids are committing suicide because they don't have any value anymore? They are, just lost it. Why do we have a destroyed society because of COVID and put into your home prisons, as I've told you about? How many businesses have been shut down and torn asunder, and families going split in every direction over whether I want the muzzle or whether I get the jab, or if you're going to die from it or be destroyed medically one way or another. Families torn apart. Families torn apart over, are you a boy? Are you a girl? Are you an it? Are you this? Are you that? Psychological warfare. Well, what I like about Lee's articles is he finishes off with the great hope. And that great hope is in Jesus Christ, in the Lord God of all creation. When you know the living God, Jesus, the risen Christ, you have hope, you have purpose, you have the definition of what it means to serve the living God, and not to have psychologically destructive forces that are out there actually affect you. But you're not hearing that from the pulpits a whole lot. I mean, I always say there are a few Reformed churches out there, and I'll call them Reformed Baptist churches even, that speak these types of truths. But for the most part, everybody's going to the rooftop, because guess what? Jesus come back tomorrow. Well, Jesus could come back tomorrow, and he could do that, by any mechanism he wants to, but most of all, he can just take you any second of the day. So you should be prepared. You should be prepared by knowing salvation in Christ is true. You should be prepared in knowing that your soul, your mind, your heart is wrapped in God for eternity. Sam Adams knew, and he talked about it. So come on back as we get into the third segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Samuel Adams Returns, and all of you in the St. Louis market and down in Lima, Ohio, and the other markets. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the program, and I highly encourage you to go to samueladamsreturns.net and to check out the second segment, which that's the only place you're going to find it, is there at the website, samueladamsreturns.net. Now, as I left off in that first segment and talked about what is going on with the Harari dude and the evil that they have planned, it comes down to this. But the hope of everything is in Christ. Bottom line, I got to start the program with this. But Candidus was correct. And I'm going to bring this to you, and then I'm going to tie it on back from 1771 to 1790 with Sam Adams. Now, there are a number of references that, I don't know, a lot of you, I had one person write to me a number of years ago, Tom, do you really expect us to read all this stuff that you put there as those references? Yeah, I do. It's not that hard, but I know people are all into the video, the quick things, and thankfully the podcast, radio, and all that. But when we finished off, what we were talking about was that Sam said that, that our enemies would fain have us lie down on the bed of sloth and security. They daily administer through the mainstream media the opiates with multiplied arts and delusions. He asked then the series of questions that we finished off in the first and portion of the second segment with, and then what resentment and indignation did we first receive the intelligence of a design to make us tributary, not to natural enemies, but infinitely more humiliating to our fellow citizens? I said patriots, but they're not patriots. They're our fellow citizens, to make us slaves to them. How insulting, indignation. And you know what? It's not tinfoil hat stuff anymore, as I talked about in the last segment. This stuff is coming about real now. It's time for us to sleep when our free government is essentially changed and a new one is forming upon quite a different system. Obama, we're fundamentally going to change America. No, a government without the least dependence upon the people. The bureaucratic state. The deep state. At every level. Not just at the federal, but at the state level. The bureaucratic rule our lives. The bureaucrats. A government without the least dependence upon the people. A government under the absolute control of a minister of state. There it is. Sam Adams said it. The administrative state. The absolute control of a minister of state, upon whose sovereign dictates is to depend not only the time when and the place where the legislative assembly shall sit, but whether it shall sit at all. And if it is allowed to meet, it shall be liable immediately to be thrown out of existence if any one point it fails in obedience to his arbitrary mandates. Well, we're seeing that in a lot of different ways, is that the politicians that we elect have given over their authority to the administrative state. And it comes to the point is that My goodness, they are ruling. They're ruling in all sorts of different ways, and the power to take the necessary and legal steps for redress for us of those grievances which we suffer by the arts and machinations of these ministers and their minions are. We can't do it. They're not going to be allowed. They don't listen to us. They call us these names. They shut us down. You go to the school board meeting and parents are investigated as domestic terrorists. What difference is there between the present state of this province or this state or this nation, which in course will be the deplorable state of all America and that of Rome under the law before mentioned? Wow. Very, very interesting. So what do we have? We have all this, against us, and that if we are voluntarily silent, which we have been, 80 years of silence. Yeah, I'm leaving that long pause in here for everybody. 80 years of silence, voluntary silent, as the conspirators would have us to be. It will be considered as an approbation of the change. That means you silent people over these last 80 years, guess what? The enemy took that as your, okay, we're fine with it. Do it. Wow. Anyway, it's time to resist. He calls it in the end here, who will presume to say that the people have not a right, or that it is not their indispensable duty to God and their country by all rational means in their power to resist them? That's what Sam Adams said. And here's a little poem that he puts in there. Be firm, my friend, nor let unmanly sloth twine round your heart's indissoluble chains. Ne'er yet by force was freedom overcome, unless corruption first dejects the pride. And guardian vigor of the free-born soul, all crude attempts of violence are vain. Determined, hold your independence, for that once destroyed, unfounded freedom is a morning dream. We're at that. You have any dreams of liberty? The liberties of our country, the freedom of our civil constitution are worth defending at all hazards. And it is our duty, to defend them from all attacks, internal especially. We have received them as a fair inheritance from our worthy ancestors. They purchased them for us with toil and danger and expensive treasure and blood, and transmitted this liberty to us with care and diligence. What have we done with it? Tossed it out the window in so many different ways. No. We're supposed to be persecuted. Don't you know that, Tom? The church is supposed to be persecuted. That's the only way Jesus is going to come back. Well, sorry, that's not the way I read the scriptures. He's not coming back for a dirty bride, and that's what's going on with most of Christianity. So let's see. We're going to go here to, Volume 4 of Samuel Adams' writings, and we're in 1790 as he is writing to none other than John Adams. This is from Boston, November 25th, 1790. It is on about, I don't know what page it is, but anyway, he's writing to John Adams, and he says, a republic, you tell me, is a government in which the people have an essential share in the sovereignty? Is not the whole sovereignty, my friend, essentially in the people? Is not the government designed for the welfare and happiness of the people? And is it not the uncontrollable essential right of the people to amend and alter or annul their constitution and frame a new one whenever they shall think it will be better promote their welfare and happiness to do it. That sovereignty resides in the people is a political doctrine which I have never heard an American politician seriously deny. That was at that time. But he describes more on what it is for representative government, so on and so forth. But in the last 5 minutes, what I want to bring to you here is he's talking about what's happening constitutionally. He's adjusting to what does it mean? And what we're going to see is something spectacular that you have to have. And this is part of the answers to that which you need to do. Here's a mix of three powers founded in the nature of man, calculated to call forth the rational faculties in the great points of legislation into exertion, to cultivate mutual friendships and good humor, and finally to enable them to decide, here you go, pay attention, not by the impulse of passion or party prejudice, but the calm voice of reason, which is the voice of God. Well, you don't hear that anywhere in political circles anymore, do you? You know, it's all about impulses of passion, all the party prejudices. But where is a calm voice of reason and knowing that the politicians are going to be doing it according to their true biblical understanding, which is from the voice of God? In this mixture, you may see your natural and actual aristocracy among mankind, operating among the several powers in the legislation and producing most happy effects. But the son of an excellent man may never inherit the qualities of his father. Boy, that's the Bush family for sure. But I'm glad in some respects because, you know, the old man, grandfather Bush, was evil, bootlegger, oil monger, millionaire, destructive, and all his sons were, anyway. This is common observation. There are many instances of its truth. Should we not therefore conclude that hereditary nobility is, not good in government? So let's see, here we go, is that all we end up with is that if you get all of that, the inheritance from ancestors who have been the minions of the ministers. Oh, there we go, the ministers again. So the same could be said about kings and successors and so on and so forth. Such kind of political beings, nobles or kings, possessing hereditary rights, the essential shares in a equipized government, are very unfit for persons to hold the scales. It shouldn't be elected. So I want to leave you with this whole idea is that this Constitution evidently founded in the exception of further progress in extraordinary degrees of virtue. That's what you need. It has to have virtue. It encourages of all seminaries of literature, which are the nurseries of virtue, depending upon the support of the government rather than title splinters or force. So he goes on to talk about that. Here is the key point. It is one of the most essential means of further and still further improvements in society and of correcting and amending moral sentiments and habits and political institutions till, by human means, directed by divine influence, men shall be prepared for that happy and holy state when the Messiah is to reign. See, he understands all of that about Jesus coming back. But you know what? If the seminaries, the pulpits, political people are not learning from the pulpits, then we're not going to have the public virtue. We're not going to have those Christian attributes to make good law. That's what he's talking about. And if we do have a virtuous and moral people, we're going to then be able to elect virtuous and moral political leaders. The bureaucrats have been appointed terribly over the last 100 years, but Sam Adams knew all about that. The Anti-Federalists did. But his last statement here is we have to do that so that we can see what it is for a happy and holy state when the Messiah is to reign. Sam Adams will return next week, so come on back to Samuel Adams Returns.